Welcome to the last presentation for today. Last but not least, we are a little bit behind schedule, but I hope you'll find this is worth the wait. Dr. Patricia Delgado is a recent graduate, very recent graduate, and I am so pleased to have her present on her applied doctoral project. And I'll make this introduction short because she's going to introduce herself, but she has a really interesting project that she did, and she did research for it. So go ahead, Patty.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stein, for your kind words as always and your support throughout this journey. As Dr. Stein stated, my name is Dr. Patricia Delgado. I'm a recent graduate in the Doctor of Psychology program. So my field of study in the Doctor of Psychology program was industrial organizational psychology. So for those of you that don't know what an IO psychologist is or does, we are non-clinical psychologists that use research and theories and best practices from various areas of psychology and human resources to improve the work lives of employees and organizational workplace climate. So with evidence-based practices, I like to say that we are the bridge, right, between different business fields and business psychology. And a little bit about me, I am originally from El Paso, Texas, a beautiful border town full of culture, amazing people, and tradition. I am the CEO and founder of my consulting group called the Bridgerify Group, and I'm a contributing author in a book named Hispanic Star Rising. I am a first-generation Mexican-American and the first in my family to complete a doctorate. I am very proud, right, of my roots and my backgrounds and all of those that came before me. And when I had to finalize my research topic, one that I know is going to be spending about a year or so researching and studying, I knew it had to represent who I am and create a real positive impact in my community. So my study was on the recruitment and retention of the Hispanic Millennial professional. And in this ADP, and I'll go into detail what that means, I created a participatory program series for organizational leaders. So a little bit about an applied doctoral project, because it's different than a dissertation. So at UAGC, the PsyD program allows students to choose whether your final research would be a traditional dissertation format or an applied doctoral project, the ADP as we call it. So this is the path I took. It is equivalent in research rigor to a dissertation, but it allowed me to be more flexible in designing and conducting my project. And because I'm a practitioner at heart and passionate about bridging research with practice, I knew this was the route for me. So as I mentioned, my applied doctoral project focuses on the recruitment and retention of professional Hispanic millennials. This focus utilized the translation of a lot of scholarly research into practice. It showcases the construction of a 3-day participatory leadership program series for organizational leaders. In order to fully accomplish this final project that I did, I performed an extensive amount of research collection and synthesis that did not encapsulate any primary research. So the program series really aims to encourage leaders to assess and reassess their recruitment and retention strategies for professional Hispanic millennials. The program series is also dedicated to creating a level of understanding and skill set for leaders to effectively manage this unique group work approaches of the Hispanic millennial. And this is all really due to their bicultural and generational qualities. So a full my full ADP project can be found in the ProQuest dissertation section of your university library. So in my ADP, my research goes into detail on many important topics that I will not cover today, unfortunately, but I encourage anybody looking for research on Hispanic millennials, Hispanic population, the employee psychological contract, data points to search for my dissertation, my ADP, and you're welcome if you cannot find it to connect with me via LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share it with you. So Hispanic millennial professionals are a unique population that delivers a cultural richness, which has been stated to be a powerhouse. Today, like I said, I'll be focusing specifically on the in-depth research I uncovered about Hispanic millennial professionals in the workplace and the challenges that leaders and organizations today are having when recruiting and retaining this amazing group of people. Today's leaders are missing out, I truly believe, on the many contributions that Hispanic millennials could make in their organization. And today's leaders continue to struggle, right, with gaining knowledge and understanding around effective management approaches that value diversity, inclusion, and individualism. What we have seen are organizations, unfortunately, that possess a one-size-fits-all mindset when leading Hispanic millennials and other minority groups, spending a large amount of time and money with failed recruitment and retention efforts. Therefore, this continual research on this topic and others that pertain to minority employees is extremely important. So just to give a little bit of background, the US Census defines Hispanics, Latino, or Spanish origin as individuals who identify themselves with one or more ethnic group or nationality. We have known for some time now that Hispanics are the largest minority group in the US and are impacting the workforce. They represent 62 million individuals and make up 18.73% of the total US population as of 2020. And by 2050, Hispanics will represent a quarter of the US population, equaling 99 million individuals and growing. Also, as of 2018, the total economic contribution of the Hispanic population, the Latino GDP in the US was 2.6 trillion, up from 3 million in previous years. In the workforce, Hispanic civilian non-institutional population workforce is higher than any other minority. So this is why this type of research and information is important. So when we look at Hispanic millennials, the population, there's staggering facts, right, that prove why this multi-talented population are essential to society and to the workforce. The data provides compelling and credible reasons for leaders, all leaders, to pause, right, and evaluate their personal strategies, management approaches, and knowledge about Hispanic millennials. So here's some data and top characteristics about Hispanic millennials. So they are identified as individuals between the ages of 25 and 40 who self-identify as Hispanic, and the median age is between 27 and 29. They represent 22% of the millennial population in their millennial group and 25% of the total Hispanic population. The Hispanic millennial makes up 40% of the working Hispanic population, a prominent and youthful, which is the big word right now that leaders need to understand, youthful group of Hispanic workers. The Hispanic millennial, they're loyal and concerned for the organization's welfare and others that they work with. It's like a family, placing usually at some times themselves secondary and laser focused on obtaining organizational goals. This is due to the Hispanic values that we carry around the concept of collectivistic culture and familismo, which is the value of family. Embracing their Hispanic heritage and American values together, Hispanic millennials are prominent influencers within their families and society, technology, of course, and are a high user of social media. They passionately believe in advancing their career, right? And achieving that American dream. They are eager and ready for the challenge. Many of them are bilingual. And the research shows that they have enhanced cognitive performance and advanced executive functioning over monolingual speakers. Another great point, leaders, to keep in mind. And Hispanic millennials do something that's quite interesting. They inherit fluidity in what research calls code switching. Call it code switching. They are able to effortlessly switch between their Hispanic values and behaviors to their American values and behaviors, really with no stress. This reveals a rare ability and skill set to cope and handle any sort of change quickly and effortlessly, as we see in the workplace right now. Change is everywhere. So this skill set is quite unique to this particular population. And for those and other reasons that I highlight in my full ADP, Hispanic millennials play and will continue to play a large part in the workforce and in society. So from all the data that I assessed, and you can find it in the appendix section of my ADP, this particular one was what stood out for me the most. Not only is it important for us to champion the Hispanic millennial, but the generation that follows them, Gen Z, is already in the workplace and sharing the same values and workplace behaviors. So together, these two generations of Hispanics represent 52% of the total Hispanic population and will lead the workforce for many, many years. Having this clear understanding, right, about how Hispanic millennials will provide leaders a unique perspective that no other population will give them. And this will also help leaders create effective recruitment strategies and retention strategies. So again, why is this important? Well, first and foremost, as I mentioned, Hispanics are the fastest, largest minority population in the US. We have also, and unfortunately, witnessed and continue to witness the slow rate of Hispanics as well as other minorities advancing in the workforce and in leadership roles. That's why it's also important. Also, why after so many years are Hispanics still experiencing the same concerns is a huge and common question in our community. One point that really is forgotten is that of any other non-native ethnicity to settle in the Americas, other than indigenous inhabitants, Spanish and Mexican descendants are the oldest of all settlers to claim, colonize, and imprint on American territory and history. With the omission of Hispanics' historical existence, today the Hispanic population in the US is seen as a subgroup. They're seen as second-class laborers, less intelligent, and not American. Therefore, it is time for the Hispanic population to reestablish their proper place in American history, which is why this is also important. It's also important to assure that Hispanic and Hispanic millennials, of course, are not overlooked by leaders or organizations, but that they are championed. Lastly, this ADP project topics are important to create awareness, which is that's something we're doing a lot these days, is creating awareness about the barriers Hispanics face, which such as educational attainment, language proficiency, work experience, the lack of training and mentorship, sponsorship. All of these impede Hispanics and mostly Hispanic millennials from advancing in the workplace. So all of this is why this type of research is important. So my ADP was grounded by prominent models and theories. Through the review of multiple studies and research, one of the most important theories that I utilize is the employee psychological theory. The employee psychological contract theory. Sometimes it's a tongue twister. The employee psychological contract theory is known as an unwritten contract that is written by the employee, and it influences how the employee engages in the organization. Also, the responsibility of the leader in the psychological contract between the employee and the leader is truly immense. Leaders need to seek and foster a positive psychological contract relationship, and it will improve the organizational climate. And if not fostered, it will not help out any sort of organizational human capital strategy. Therefore, my research was broken down into the 4 following areas, and I'm going to go through these briefly. Like I said, in my actual ADP, there is more information, but this is just an overview. So in the first focus, I looked at just what is employee psychological contract in the workplace, right? So the research did inform us that there is an interconnectedness between the employee psychological, cognitive, thinking process, and organizational behavior and to performance in the workplace. With both the employee and the employer's willingness to be flexible, make continual adjustments, and create that bridge for open renegotiation of the contract as they state, and understanding, they create a balanced and robust psychological contract relationship, which create effective organizational outcomes. The research also shows that employee performance, aligned employee interest, and high employee motivation, of course, with trust, good faith, creates high employee engagement. Like I said before, a leader's role in managing the psychological contract is vital in creating a positive outcome. At times, there could be what the research calls a psychological breach in the contract. And therefore, it is important that leaders understand and are aware of how their role plays in those breaches in order to overcome the breach and turn into a positive outcome. So the next section then, I went a little deeper into the employee psychological contract and how it relates to culture. So the research shows that any use of fairness and discrimination and any employee perception of discriminatory actions or behaviors done by a leader or by an organization will cause a negative impact in the minority employee psychological contract. So organizational commitments and goals to something we're seeing today, diversity and inclusion, will be highly noticed and judged by minority employees. So for example, if an organization creates a DEI strategy and really just to check off a box in their strategic plan, this will be very noticeable to their minority employees. Or if they offer a one-time training on unconscious bias, and then that's the extent of their DEI initiatives, minority employees might see this as a possible loss of trust and just trust in the organization. More than ever, what minority employees need from leaders and organizations is the flexibility in their employee-employer relationship. Work conditions, of course, that create freedom of thought, individualism, and a continual sense of psychological safety. That's a big part of what's going on right now in organizations, is the lack of psychological safety. That's so important when we're trying to maintain a positive psychological contract. It's feeling a sense of, I can be who I am in my workplace, and that's okay. And nothing's going to no one's going to look at me wrong or anything. They're going to value my individualistic perspective. It's also important for leaders to understand that the majority of time, the method, and this is important, the method in which minority employees decode information, the way they judge situations, perceive ethnic discrimination, and feel valued have been created through their own personal employee organizational experiences and life experiences, which are very different and extremely different than their Anglo employee experiences. Organizations should not assume that cultural differences amongst their minority employees are received and perceived in the same way or in the same method as Anglo employees. Lastly, the research informed us that leaders and organizational influencers who understand the immense contribution that minority employees give and who really engage in genuine and honest connectivity now more than ever will drive positive psychological contracts, organizational and financial outcomes, and overall positive organizational culture. So it's a big piece of research that I feel is important to now let's translate that into action. The last, and of course, the last two important points that I focused on was Hispanics and Hispanic millennials as it pertains to the workplace and psychological contract. So the research did demonstrate that cultural values for Hispanics relate and are interconnected to workplace performance, motivation, their perception, and their behavior. This is seen, of course, like I stated before, through the example that I mentioned, where the Hispanic will at times overlook themselves for the sake of the organization. And they care about the people they work with. All this stems from the cultural values of collectivistics and familismo that I mentioned before. The Hispanic millennial professional is unique, and I can't say that enough. They're unique, they're capable, they're proficient, they're skillful, they have a lot to offer. And they're attracted to organizations that encourage them to be their authentic self and make them feel comfortable. They have the ability, like I said, as no other population, to connect and relate with their older Hispanic family members and community and their millennial peers. And it gives them a cultural richness and advanced social behavior skill set not seen in any other population. If the Hispanic millennial employee psychological contract is mismanaged or perceived highly as unfair, Hispanic employees will feel isolated and have high levels of stress, resulting in a negative job performance. The research also encourages that today's leaders and organizations should assess their current, and I can't state that enough, should assess their current human capital strategies with a more cultural conscious. The research isn't saying, we're not saying that Hispanics need special treatment or special policies, but understanding that their behaviors are linked to their cultural values should be a main factor when creating new human capital strategies. Lastly, the research shares best practices that will help advance Hispanic millennials in the workplace, such as I mentioned, programs as mentorship programs, coaching, educational reimbursement. Educational attainment in Hispanics is quite interesting. We actually are the largest minority to gain a degree, a bachelor's degree. But then as we look into masters and doctorates, we go down and even further down, while some of the other minority groups go up. So it's showing us in the research that it stops there for Hispanics after you get your bachelor's, which is wonderful. And I think that is a big step forward, a positive big step. But after there's no advancement for probably many reasons. So if organizations can encourage that doctorate level advancement of education, that would be a big selling point for Hispanic employees, Hispanic millennial employees. Also, just very family-centric focused family policies in their HR benefits package is something else. Like we said, family is very important. So really taking into consideration these cultural values and integrating them in what they're currently doing would really go a long way. So those are the 4 areas of focus that I focused on. And like I said, there's more detail in my ADP, but I was able to gather all this research, synthesize the research, and then finalize the creation of my leadership. I don't like calling it a training program. I like calling it a participatory program series because it is a participatory form of education. It's not just me. It wouldn't be just me talking up front. It would be involving the full cohort of individuals. So this is targeted, this particular program is targeted for CEOs, COOs, and executive level leaders. And we know that they have a major role in any sort of organizational advancement, in any sort of organizational change management efforts. When the leader, higher leaders are involved, fully involved, there's a different outcome. So I made it very particular and strict to just them. It is a 3-day series providing leaders with an overview and understanding of the Hispanic culture and the specific cultural and ethnic identity factors of the Hispanic millennial. It also provides leaders the knowledge to be prepared, right, for all the many demographic and workplace shifts. And we are seeing workplace shifts happening every day. This type of program would help them be able to maneuver through all of those. It'll give them an insight on how to positively manage the important concept that I've been speaking about, which is the employee psychological contract. So some best practices and barriers that came out of all the research are these that I've stated here. For millennials, for those of us that have researched millennials, we all know that in order to better coach and manage millennials, it is about setting proper expectations. And this also goes for Hispanic millennials. That was one characteristics that was shared between both of them. Providing a diverse set of resources and policies is important. Like I said, coaching and mentorship, educational programs, even organizations joining Hispanic-based affiliated organizations in their community can go a very long way. That's a big best practice that not many organizations are tapping into. Just getting out there in the community could really make a big difference. Also, it's important for leaders to take time and effort to understand all their minority employees, not just Hispanic millennials. There are personalized actions to do, such as one-on-one meetings, focus groups. You can do a survey. Just engaging with the workforce directly really goes a long way, getting to know that person one-on-one. Of course, there's always challenges, right? And some challenges are rooted around the mismanagement of employee needs and organizational employee resources. That's a fact. The lack of the knowledge and understanding and how to support these groups continues to happen. Leaders in time, and I truly believe this, will discover that all the answers they need to advance their organization and to address any concerns are really found within their own workforce. It really is. If they would just take some time to go down there to the front lines and talk to the people. So I've given a lot of information. And like I said, I encourage you, if this is of your interest or you would like to use this for your own research, please reach out to me or look for my ADP in ProQuest. Because I really believe this ADP is a business case, right? It's a business case for leaders to pause, silence the biased rhetoric voices, possibly drowning out the opportunities for new and greater possibilities, and to be open to new perspectives without fear or hesitation. My ADP is also dedicated to the universal intention and will to change moral and economic imperatives. However, it is evident that in order to move any dial, we need an all hands on deck, right? We need an all hands on deck approach that's required from organizational leaders, from other minority populations, from the Hispanic population as well, and the Hispanic millennial individual themselves. With substantial and in-depth literature review, data, and practitioner best practices that my ADP has, I feel it equips leaders with the tools required to make informed and well-versed decisions, specifically around the recruitment and retention of Hispanic millennial professionals. Most importantly, my ADP reveals that leaders really who understand the employee psychological contract and the cultural attributes of the Hispanic millennial professional will have all the knowledge and understanding to effectively create recruitment and retention strategies to create and keep this awesome group of workers. So I thank you all for your time. I know we're all very busy, so I do appreciate it, and I'm open to any questions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Patty. And anyone who's in the audience, if you want to type your questions, or we're starting to get congratulations here. Ramona Banks says, thank you for the wonderful presentation, Dr. Delgado. Doesn't that sound good?
Yes,
And everything. You know, most of my questions got answered because it was such a great, a really informative presentation. I guess what I'd like you to maybe espouse a little bit on, because I know you've done a lot of research, is about Hispanics as leaders. You know, particularly Hispanic millennials, because it's not too far off where they're going to be the ones that are our leaders. How is your program or some type of program going to help them, and how is that going to change the workplace?
So as thank you for the question. So because of the awareness and increase of information and knowledge about the culture, I believe that extra nugget of information, it will help leaders better understand how to create that support to the Hispanic millennial. And also, I think millennials will also create understanding on what is it they need to be in order to move up into a CEO or CO position. So I see it as just a two-legged support system that, if done with intentionality and if done with really openness to just with that, like moving forward with curiosity of each other, I think I could see both of them benefiting. But it does take work, right? And it takes us to stop and do some self-reflection on our own biases, even us as Hispanics. However, again, I'm a true believer in research and knowledge being the tools to help us be better. That I think this form of information and learning could help us unlearn and learn the new things we need to learn in order for each party, organizational leaders, organizations, and Hispanic millennials to advance.
Thanks. I've got a couple of more. Okay. This is more of a comment. This is from Mary Saunders, Dr. Delgado. Like that?
I like
Remarkable
it.
Presentation and awesome visuals. I agree with you that leaders play a vital role in ensuring the recruitment and retention of millennials as they bring the skill sets, new perspectives that are needed for the 21st century organization to thrive. It has been very frustrating to millennials in the workplace. Hence, employers stand the chance of losing these knowledgeable workers who are able to bring so much more to the table. Again, great presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, the questions are coming in really fast.
Okay.
Rosie Delgado, I think you might know.
I think I might know her.
Know her? She wants to know, I'm not sure I understand it, but since you know her, you might. How receptive are chief positions open to diversity and inclusion these days?
How accepted?
How receptive are chief positions? I'm not. Maybe she'll add to that, and we can figure that out.
Maybe she means in the sense that current organizations right now are placing a DEI chief position in their organizations, and those that I've seen that, and I've seen in the research that's happening right now. Everybody's trying to get a DEI representative in somewhere in their organization, but when it's done with true structural strategy, and it becomes, excuse me, let me backtrack, and becomes part of the culture of the organization. Like I said, it's not just a let's check a box off. When the DEI initiative becomes part of the culture, their governance, their policies, the way that they run their HR office, when that happens, that position is pivotal in the success.
And here's one from Jody Hamerda. Dr. Delgado, what thoughts do you have on the use of Hispanic that includes so much diversity? Do you feel that use of that label is accepted by people labeled as such? If you could change the label, what other terms would you use?
Wow, that's a great question. She's so right. You know, people think Hispanic, when they think Hispanic, they see just, you know, someone that's brown. But Hispanics are more than that. They're from Chile, they're from Ecuador, they're from Colombia. I have a wonderful friend who's from Argentina, and she does not look like me. So wow, if I could create a new word that encapsulated everything and all the beauty of the Latino and Hispanic community, I don't even know. I'd have to think about that one, but that's a great question. We should do that. We should create a new word. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of history and why Hispanics is used. And I go into that information in my ADP of why specifically they use the word Hispanic. So I know there's just a lot of back history in that, but that's a great question. I'd love to dig into that.
I know I've seen Latino, Latina, and then Latinx and
yeah,
all of that.
Yeah.
Dr. Sundstrom asked, how would you like to see your research be used in a practical sense, Dr. Patty?
How would I like to see my research used in a practical sense? Well, I think that's what I did in my ADP, is that I took the research and then I translated it into a way of teaching it to leaders. And so with that translation, I'm making the research, an actual tool. So in the program, I have self-reflection tools that are used, that are research, are backed by the research. I recreated the psychological contract model, and it's a roadmap which I use in the program to walk the leader through the thinking of an employee. So I believe I've done that in my ADP. Of course, I can do more, and I'm hoping to do that. That's a future goal of mine, to actually bring this training to life, and let's do it. Let's beta it. Let's try it. If anybody's out there willing to fund something like that, I'm all ears.
And I'm sure that you're going to have a wonderful career in bringing this forward. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I do want to bring a couple of other comments here. Ramona Banks says, yes, the project provides a wonderful means of sponsorship. I believe that the program is a wonderful means of applying DEI on a professional and personal level. This program is a wonderful example of efforts that should be provided for every workplace.
Wow.
So lots of Valelo says congrats and thank you, Dr. Delgado.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Ramona. I appreciate that. I'm like I said, my goal of doing this and studying this for a whole year and putting all my effort, being away from my family to do this was something I knew it had to be part of who I am. So thank you.
And I know Dr. Sundstrom's the host now, as we're running over.
Okay.
But I just want to say, how proud I am, how proud we are of having you as, presenting this as part of your doctoral, as part of the doctoral community at UAGC. Dr. Sundstrom, do you have a?
Thank you very much, Patty. Very interesting presentation. My question was really, how do people find this tool? It's wonderful. So, I want it sold on every street corner.
Oh, you're so sweet.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for hanging in here. We did run a little bit late today because of some technical problems. So thanks to Dr. Delgado and Dr. Stein for making those adjustments. Thank you all. Please remember that we have 4 more presentations tomorrow. They start at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we would love to see you drop in for some of those sessions too. So thanks very much. Have a great rest of your day. And Patty, we'll see you around.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Wonderful
Bye-bye.
job.